I knew something was wrong the moment I sat down, but I didn't expect it to hit me as hard as it did. My mother slid a folded piece of paper across the table as calmly as if she were passing the salt. No smile, no explanation, just a quiet, almost practiced motion that made my stomach tighten before I even opened it. I thought it was a receipt, or maybe a list of things she wanted me to pick up. I wish it had been that simple. When I unfolded it, my hands went cold. At the top, in bold letters, were the words, "Contribution for Emma's wedding." Underneath were numbers, long, heavy numbers, $20,000, listed like it was nothing more than a grocery bill. My throat went dry as I stared at it, trying to make sense of why my name was attached to a cost I hadn't agreed to, or even been asked about. My father didn't wait for me to speak. He just leaned back in his chair, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and said, "Since you make the most money, it's only fair you handle this part." His tone was flat, final, like he was explaining how gravity worked. My mother nodded without looking at me. Even that small gesture felt like a door closing. Emma sat across from me, pretending to fuss with her bracelet. She wouldn't look up. Not once. Not even when I said her name. And that hurt more than the number on the page. Because she knew. She knew this was wrong, and she didn't say a word. I tried to laugh at first because the alternative was letting my voice shake. I held up the paper and asked if this was some kind of joke. My father didn't blink. He just said, "Family means sacrifice." As if that answered everything. As if that word, family, was supposed to excuse the weight they were placing on my shoulders. The room felt smaller after that, the air heavier. My parents went back to eating like they'd finished their part of the conversation, like my answer didn't matter because they'd already decided it for me. Every clink of a fork, every slow breath made the silence feel sharper. I looked at Emma again, hoping for something, an apology, a whisper, a sign she didn't want this either. But she kept her eyes down, cheeks pink with embarrassment or guilt. I couldn't tell. Maybe both. Maybe neither. My chest tightened as I stared at the bill. $20,000. My name. My responsibility. My silence. I felt something crack inside me, a soundless break that didn't show on my face but echoed through my thoughts. They waited for me to say yes. They expected it. They always did. I folded the paper slowly, as if it were fragile, even though the only fragile thing in the room was me. I placed it beside my plate and kept my voice steady, because breaking in front of them would have been another kind of payment. I didn't answer them that night, but in the quiet between their expectations and my heartbeat, I felt the beginning of something they didn't see coming, something shifting, something waking, and they had no idea what they had just set in motion. I grew up thinking silence was the price of love. It took me years to understand that it was just the price my parents preferred me to pay. When I was little, I learned early that Emma's laughter mattered more than my questions, and her tears carried more weight than anything I felt. She was the delicate one, the star, the girl who needed protecting. And I was the daughter who knew how to hold everything together without asking for anything back. I became the helper before I even knew what the word meant. I tied Emma's shoes, fixed her projects, covered for her when she forgot homework. My mother would smile at me with this soft, absent look and say, "You're such a good big sister." But the praise always felt like a reminder, a quiet warning that goodness was expected, not appreciated. Birthdays passed like shadows. Emma's were events, balloons, cakes, friends filling the house until it sounded alive. On mine, we usually forgot until the evening when someone would say, "Oh, right, it's today," and hand me a last-minute card. I used to pretend it didn't bother me. I told myself it meant I was mature, that I didn't need all that attention, but I remember lying awake some nights wondering what it felt like to be celebrated. School wasn't much different. When Emma got a B, my parents clapped like she'd won an award. When I brought home straight A's, my father skimmed the paper and said, "Good. Keep it up. Not proud of you. Not well done." Just a reminder to maintain the standard they had quietly built for me. The older I got, the more invisible my efforts became. My role was simple: fix things, carry things, smooth things, and never interrupt the story they like to tell about their perfect younger daughter. Emma made mistakes, of course. Big ones. The kind that would have gotten anyone else grounded for a month. But my parents always had a reason to excuse her. She's still growing. She didn't mean it. Don't be so harsh. I learned not to question it. Every protest only made me sound jealous, ungrateful, or dramatic. So I swallowed it all: the unfairness, the imbalance, the 100 small hurts that never found a voice. When I finally grew old enough to earn my own money, a new version of responsibility settled on me. Not spoken, not written, just expected. I paid for groceries sometimes, covered small bills without being asked, picked up the slack because that was what I had been trained to do: fill the gaps no one else wanted to acknowledge. So when my parents handed me that $20,000 invoice at dinner, it wasn't just another request. It was the loudest echo of every year I spent shrinking myself to fit the shape they needed. It was every forgotten birthday, every dismissed achievement, every time Emma's needs stood taller than mine. I looked at that folded paper again, my fingers tightening around it. And for the first time in my life, I let myself whisper the words I'd never dared to say. Not this time. I tried to talk to Emma the next morning, hoping that if anyone would understand how unfair this was, it would be her. She was sitting on her bed scrolling through dress ideas, surrounded by fabric samples and open tabs of venues. I stood in the doorway holding the invoice, waiting for her to look up. When she finally did, she smiled like nothing was wrong. I told her calmly that $20,000 wasn't something I could hand over without thinking. I waited for her to react, to show even a flicker of concern, but she just shrugged and said, "It's just money. You can afford it." The words dropped between us like a stone. Just money. I felt something inside me shift, a quiet crack I couldn't ignore. I asked her why she didn't think she should contribute too, and she laughed softly, almost confused. "Because this is my wedding," she said. "Mom and Dad said you'd help." As if their expectation alone justified everything. I walked out before I said something I'd regret. Still, I went to the wedding planning meetings, partly out of habit, partly out of hope that someone would acknowledge how strange this had become. But every time I walked in, I felt like an extra in a movie starring the daughter they actually loved. My parents glowed when they talked about Emma. How beautiful she'd look, how perfect the venue was, how proud they were. When I spoke, they barely responded. My words floated in the air for a second before dissolving into nothing. Once, while we were choosing decorations, my mother sighed dreamily and said, "Emma deserves the best. She's getting married before you, after all." She didn't say it to hurt me, but it landed like a slap anyway, as if love, effort, or worth could be measured by the order in which we walked down an aisle, as if I was less deserving because my life didn't fit their timeline. I watched Emma twirl in front of a mirror, holding a lace veil against her hair. She looked happy, and a part of me wanted to feel happy for her too. But standing there, invisible in the reflection beside her, all I felt was the weight of being needed but never valued. They talked about costs and upgrades, as if I wasn't the one expected to cover them. Every suggestion from them became another dollar pulled from my future. Another reminder that they saw me less as a daughter and more as a wallet that happened to walk and breathe. I smiled anyway, because that was my role. The responsible one, the quiet one, the one who never made things harder. But as I watched them celebrate plans built on my bank account, something inside me settled into a calm, heavy truth. If this wedding wasn't mine, neither was the life they kept trying to script for me. I didn't notice the pattern when I was young. Back then, helping felt natural, almost noble. I remember being 16 and using my part-time paycheck to buy groceries because my mom said she was a little short this week. I remember paying my dad's prescription copay once, just once, and then somehow it became my responsibility every month. They thanked me the first few times. After that, it was treated like a routine chore I'd always done. What still stings is how normal it felt to me. I thought being useful meant being loved. I thought carrying the weight made me dependable, mature, the daughter they could count on. I never questioned why Emma wasn't asked to do the same. I just assumed she wasn't ready, or too busy, or too sensitive. There was always a reason to protect her, and always a reason I could handle more. But standing in the kitchen one evening, watching my mother fold dish towels while I held the wedding invoice in my hand, the past started connecting itself like threads pulled tight. Every small favor, every quiet sacrifice, every moment I'd stepped up without being asked, it all added up to this, a bill big enough to choke my future, handed to me like it was tradition. I asked her gently, trying not to sound angry, "Mom, why me? Why am I the only one expected to pay this much?" She didn't even pause her folding, didn't look at me. She just said, "Because Emma needs it. You don't." 4 words that erased years of pretending. Emma needs it. You don't. As if my feelings, my savings, my plans, my life were somehow less important. As if being capable meant I didn't deserve care. As if being strong meant I didn't deserve softness. I stood there staring at her, waiting for her to realize what she'd just admitted. But she moved on to the next towel, humming quietly, completely unaware that something inside me had just snapped into clarity. They had never seen me as someone with needs, only as someone who could meet theirs. I wasn't the daughter who got protected or celebrated. I was the one who filled the unpaid roles, the helper, the fixer, the provider, a resource dressed up as family. And for the first time, I let myself feel the truth of it. The invoice sat on my desk for hours before I finally forced myself to look at it properly. Not emotionally, not as a daughter. As a woman staring at a document that felt more like a verdict than a request. I traced the numbers with my finger, line by line, each item written with unsettling precision. Flowers, $2,800. Catering, $7,200. Dress alterations, $150. Even the honeymoon deposit was there, tucked neatly between venue fees and photography charges. It didn't just feel detailed. It felt calculated, almost rehearsed. The longer I stared, the more wrong it felt. Some costs seemed too high, others repeated twice with slightly different descriptions. 2 catering charges, 2 floral invoices, a suspicious service coordination fee that didn't match anything the wedding planner mentioned. I felt the first quiet spark of suspicion, the kind that hums low in the back of your mind, before it becomes a warning. I opened my laptop and started gathering what I could. Old email chains, digital receipts, screenshots of Emma's messages. Nothing dramatic, just small pieces to compare against the bill. When that wasn't enough, I reached out to the planner with a simple question, something polite. "Could you send me an updated breakdown of what's been paid so far?" She replied within minutes, cheerful and oblivious. When I opened the document she sent, my stomach tightened. Half the charges on the invoice weren't hers. The planner's totals were thousands lower. Some items didn't exist at all. Others had already been paid weeks ago by someone else. And tucked inside a forwarded thread was the biggest shock, an emailed receipt addressed to my father, showing he'd moved one of the wedding payments into a completely different account. Not Emma's wedding account. His. I sat there frozen, my hands cold, my breath too shallow. The truth formed slowly, heavily, like a weight settling on my chest. This wasn't about celebrating Emma. It wasn't even about family. This was about money, his mistakes, his debts, and me, the daughter who always stepped in, being used as the fix. He didn't hand me a bill. He handed me a cover-up. The realization hollowed me out. My entire life I thought giving was love. But now I saw it clearly. Every favor, every responsibility, every "you're the strong one" had been shaping me for this moment. To absorb a blow meant for him. I closed the planner's file with shaking hands, the invoice still staring up at me like an accusation I didn't deserve. For the first time, I understood. This wasn't a wedding problem. It was a trap, and I was done walking into it blindly. I didn't plan to go further. I told myself I'd uncovered enough, but once a lie cracks, it never stops at the surface. It spreads. And the deeper I went, the more the ground beneath my family shifted in ways I couldn't ignore. I logged into my father's shared account one night, the one we used years ago when I helped him pay bills as a teenager. I'd forgotten the password until my fingers typed it from memory. Inside, tucked between old statements, was another tab I'd never seen before. A second account. Same bank, same name, different number, and linked directly to what was labeled Emma Wedding Fund. My pulse thudded as I opened the statements. Month after month, money moved in clean increments. 500 here, 1,000 there. Then larger amounts, thousands at a time, leaving the account without explanation. By the last page, over $12,000 had vanished into places I couldn't trace. Transfers marked as family needs, service adjustments, and one terrifying note labeled "cleared by eldest daughter." I never cleared anything. My hands shook as I dug through drawer after drawer of old documents, hunting for anything that connected the pieces. Tax notices, receipts with my name scribbled in handwriting that wasn't mine, a signature copy taped to a form dated 2 years ago. My signature, except not. My curves, my loops, but wrong in ways no one else would notice. I whispered it under my breath, too afraid to say it louder. Forgery. I found unpaid taxes hidden behind miscellaneous expenses. Insurance letters marked delinquent. All tucked away in folders labeled with sentimental things, memories, family projects, home improvements, as if guilt could be softened with nostalgia. The debt wasn't new. It was years old. Years of manipulation covered by years of me stepping in. Years of them counting on the quiet daughter who never asked questions. I confronted him in the living room, documents clutched in my hands. My father didn't flinch, didn't deny. He only sighed, like I was inconveniencing him. "You owe us," he said calmly. "We raised you. You wouldn't be anything without us." The words hit like a slap, sharp, familiar, expected. And suddenly the room felt smaller, the walls closer, his voice louder than it had any right to be. But this time, something inside me didn't bend. It hardened. While he talked, I slid my phone into my pocket and let it record every word, every threat, every guilt-laced reminder of debts I never agreed to. I saved the statements. I photographed the forged documents. I stored everything in hidden folders, each one labeled with a date. For years, they'd kept ledgers of my worth. Now I was keeping a ledger of theirs. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of where the truth would lead. I sat across from the financial advisor, trying to steady my breathing as he flipped through the documents. His brow tightened with every page. When he finally looked up, his voice was gentle in a way that made everything worse. "Lena, these accounts weren't opened by you, were they?" I shook my head. He exhaled, slow and heavy. "Then this isn't family budgeting. This is fraud." The word hung there, cold and sharp. Fraud. I felt it settle into my chest like a stone. He pointed out transactions tied to my name, credit pulls I never approved, and accounts created with slight misspellings of my signature, tricks used by people who knew their victim wouldn't question them. Every detail was proof that my parents hadn't just crossed a line. They'd erased it long ago. Later, the attorney confirmed the same thing. "They used your credit without consent. That's identity misuse. And these transfers? These are intentional." She tapped the folder in my lap. "You need to protect yourself." Protect myself? I'd spent my entire life protecting them. Their comfort, their reputation, their finances. Hearing those words felt like stepping into sunlight after years indoors, bright enough to sting. From that day, I pulled back quietly. I stopped offering money, stopped volunteering help, stopped filling in their silences with excuses. Instead, I smiled more, nodded, kept the peace. My calmness fooled them. They mistook it for surrender. My mother even reached out, patting my hand one night as she thanked me for being the responsible one. The irony tasted bitter. Responsible was the word they'd always used to keep me obedient. Now it became the mask I wore while building the case they never imagined I'd have the courage to prepare. I met with advisors in secret. I updated passwords. I froze my credit. I copied every suspicious document, every message, every forged form. I learned exactly how much they'd taken, how long they'd been doing it, and how deeply they assumed I would never fight back. At home, I played the quiet daughter again, but inside I felt something shifting. Not revenge, not anger, just a clear, steady resolve. A strength I didn't know belonged to me until I stopped carrying everything for them. One night, I sat on my bed with the folder open in front of me. Pages of proof, years of lies, evidence they never thought I'd understand. They taught me to take responsibility. Now they would learn what that really means. The wedding looked like something torn from a magazine. Soft lights, white roses climbing every arch, a string quartet playing music that floated through the air like everything was perfect. Emma glowed in her dress, radiant in a way that made it easy to understand why people adored her. I stood near the back, watching guests sip champagne and marvel at the decor, all of them unaware of the truth hidden beneath the shine. My parents moved through the room with practiced smiles, stopping at every table to brag. "Lena insisted on helping," my mother said, loud enough for me to hear. "She covered most of it. Such a generous girl." My father added, "She understands that family is about sacrifice." Sacrifice, his favorite word when he meant obedience. A few guests turned to me with warm smiles, offering thanks for things I hadn't chosen and never agreed to fund. I nodded politely, feeling the anger settle like ice in my ribs. I kept quiet. I always did. But today, silence wasn't submission. It was strategy. While they entertained the crowd, I moved quietly through the room, listening. People talk freely at weddings, forgetting who walks behind them. I overheard my mother telling an aunt that I owed the family a little help after everything we did for her. I heard a cousin joke that Emma always had it easier because Lena picks up the slack. I recorded what mattered, each sentence another puzzle piece. Later, when Emma found me near the dessert table, she gave me a soft smile, the kind she used when she wanted something. "I know this was a lot," she said, adjusting her earring. But it's always been your role, right? You're good with responsibility. She said it casually, like commenting on the weather. I pressed record in my pocket without flinching. She had no idea. She never did. My father gave a toast as the night grew warmer. He stood tall, basking in attention, and raised his glass toward me. "Family is built on sacrifice," he declared, and tonight, Lena showed us what family truly means. Everyone clapped. I didn't. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the truth behind the performance. Fear hidden beneath pride, desperation masked as authority. A man who needed me far more than he would ever admit. I left before the dancing started, slipping out into the cold night air. The music faded behind me as I walked to my car, the sky wide and sharp above. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. I had everything I needed, and the next step would change everything. I woke up 2 days after the wedding with a strange sense of calm, like the part of me that used to tremble had finally gone quiet. I sat at my desk, opened a blank email, and began writing. No emotion, no anger, just facts. I attached every document I'd gathered over the past weeks, the forged signatures, the duplicate invoices, the missing funds, the screenshots of accounts opened under my name, the recordings of their own words. I added the planner's corrected budget, the attorney's notes, and a neat timeline of every suspicious transfer tied to the wedding fund. Then I typed one sentence. I believe everyone listed here deserves to know the truth. I sent it to my parents, to Emma, to every business partner connected to my father's accounts, to the financial institutions flagged in the advisor's report. And then, with a steady breath, I closed my laptop. No dramatic message, no accusations. I didn't need to explain anything. Truth doesn't need decoration. It stands on its own. The phone calls started within minutes. First my mother, 6 missed calls in a row, then my father, then Emma, then numbers I didn't recognize. By noon, my voicemail was full. By evening, they were pounding on my door. I didn't open it. Through the peephole, I saw my father pacing on the porch, red-faced and furious, spitting words I could barely hear. My mother stood behind him, crying the kind of desperate tears she used to use when she wanted me to feel guilty. Emma was on the steps, arms crossed, glaring like I had personally shattered her world. "Lena!" my father roared. "Open this door right now!" I didn't move. "You ungrateful child!" he shouted. "You think you can pull something like this? You think you can humiliate us?" I leaned my forehead against the door, listening to the rage that once terrified me. It didn't anymore. His anger wasn't power. It was fear. The kind of fear that only appears when someone realizes the person they depended on has finally stopped kneeling. My mother's voice broke through his shouting. "Lena, sweetheart, please, just undo this. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. You know how hard things have been." I closed my eyes. That familiar hook, the guilt they always dangled in front of me, no longer caught on anything. "No," I said through the door, calm and steady. "I won't fix lies I didn't create." Emma jumped in then, her voice sharp. "You ruined everything. My wedding week is destroyed because of you. Why couldn't you wait? Why couldn't you talk to us first?" I almost laughed. Talk. As if talking had ever changed the way they treated me. As if my voice had ever mattered to them before it became dangerous. "I didn't ruin anything," I said quietly. "I revealed it." My father slammed his fist against the door so hard the wood rattled. "If you do this," he snarled, "you are dead to this family. Do you hear me? Dead." I let the silence stretch. His words should have hurt. Once they would have carved straight through me, but now they meant nothing. I wasn't losing a family. I was finally stepping out of the ashes of one that had never been real. The investigations began faster than I expected. 1 week after the email, a letter arrived at my parents' house from the tax authority, then another from a financial oversight board. Their business partners demanded meetings. Auditors requested documents my father could no longer manipulate or hide. Every lie he had stacked so carefully over the years finally met the weight of daylight, and daylight was unforgiving. I didn't see any of it up close. I heard it in pieces, whispered through relatives, murmured through coworkers, hinted at by neighbors who used to worship my parents' spotless image. Now they crossed the street instead of saying hello. They lowered their voices when my family walked past. Reputation, once polished like glass, shattered faster than any of us expected. Emma's marriage didn't survive the impact untouched either. Her husband confronted her about the lies, the money, the quiet acceptance of things she'd always pretended not to notice. I heard she cried for days. I heard he threatened to leave. I heard she blamed me again. But even those stories reached me like echoes from another life, distant, faint, hollow. I watched it all from afar, not with joy or spite, but with a steady kind of release. I hadn't wanted chaos. I hadn't wanted ruin. I just wanted the truth to stop suffocating me. And now that it was out, the air finally felt clean. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of town, a place with creaky floors and sunlight that warmed the walls in a way my childhood home never had. For the first few days, I kept waiting for guilt to catch up with me. The tightening in my chest, the urge to apologize just to keep the peace. But it never came. My phone vibrated constantly with messages from my parents, each one dripping with blame or desperation. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be. Some evenings I'd sit on the floor, surrounded by unpacked boxes, listening to the quiet. At first it felt strange, like a space I hadn't earned, but slowly the quiet turned into comfort. No shouting, no expectations, no invisible ledger tallying my worth. Just silence. Soft, honest, mine. On the night I finished unpacking, I lit a small candle on the kitchen counter. The flame flickered gently, throwing warm light across the room. I stood there for a moment, letting the stillness settle into my bones. This silence, I whispered to myself, finally belongs to me. I didn't plan on going back, not ever. But months later, when the house finally sold and the new owners asked us to clear out what was left in the attic, I found myself driving down the old street with a strange tightness in my chest. Not fear, not sadness, just an echo of the girl I used to be, the one who tried so hard to belong there. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The windows once felt like eyes watching my every move, but now they were just glass, empty, fading. I walked up the driveway with steady steps, the same driveway where I learned to ride a bike, where I carried groceries after school because no one else would. My father opened the door before I could knock. He looked older, softer, as if the weight he used to place on everyone else had finally settled on him instead. He didn't shout. He didn't glare. He just stepped aside and let me in, his silence louder than any threat he'd ever made. My mother was in the living room, her hands twisting a tissue to shreds. Emma stood in the corner, arms wrapped around herself, eyes glued to the floor. No one spoke at first. I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel anger. I felt distance, like I was walking through a museum of a life that no longer belonged to me. I picked up the few boxes I'd left behind. Old sketchbooks, a jacket I once loved, a photo of me at 7 years old with a smile too big for my face, a smile that didn't know what was coming. My mother finally whispered, "We didn't think you'd come." I set the box down and looked at her gently. I'm not here to argue, I said. I'm not angry anymore. Her eyes lifted, hopeful, ready to take that as forgiveness. But I wasn't handing out forgiveness like a coupon. I wasn't here to heal what they never tried to fix. I'm just done, I added softly. That's all. Emma shifted, her voice barely audible. You really hate us that much? I shook my head. No. Hate keeps you tied to people. I let go. She flinched like the truth had weight. Maybe it did. My father cleared his throat, the way he used to before lecturing me. But this time, the authority was gone. His voice cracked when he spoke. We thought you'd come back eventually. I met his eyes. I left so I could live. Coming back isn't part of that. I picked up my boxes, walked toward the door, and paused only once. Not to look at them, but to look at the house. The rooms that taught me silence. The kitchen where I learned responsibility wasn't love. The table where they handed me that $20,000 bill, thinking they could buy my compliance one last time. Funny how that bill, the thing that almost broke me, became the moment that set me free. Outside, the air felt open and untouched. I carried my things to the car without looking back. The door behind me closed with a soft click, not a slam, a sound that felt final. In my new life, freedom didn't look like fireworks or celebration. It looked like building something steady. A small support group I started for adults who grew up in homes like mine, people who learned too early that being useful was the price of being loved. Every story they shared reminded me of the girl I used to be. Every meeting reminded me of the woman I'd chosen to become. Freedom has a cost. So does staying chained. Driving away from that house, I realized something simple, something quiet, something true. The moment I refused to pay for their lies was the moment I began reclaiming everything they tried to take from me. Sometimes the bill you refuse to pay becomes the moment you finally understand your worth.